Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live event. Just before we kick off, I wanted to make sure those of you who are on the live, first of all, thank you for dialing in for the live version. Welcome to this live event. Just before we kick off, I wanted to make sure those of you who are on the live, first of all, thank Yes, okay, sorry about that. So that was our first technical check. So we now have fixed that. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Could you give us in the live chat heads up or heads down if you're having any issues with connectivity, with hearing us, with seeing us, just to make sure we're all set up to start, and we'll give everyone 30 more seconds to dial in. The live chat is on your right, so just want to make sure you can hear us okay and everything is running smoothly. Okay, my colleagues here seem to be nodding positively, so I'll take that as a yes. But please, at any point in time during today's live stream, let us know if there's any issues. We want to make sure that you can hear us. That's what we're here for. Okay, let me get to the content. Thank you, dear developers, for dedicating your time and joining us today. This is one of our regular live streams that we aim to bring to you, and we're dialing in today from our office here in Google in Singapore. My name is Masha. I'm part of the online partnership group that works with web developers, helping you grow your business and your ad monetization with our product. And I'll let my colleague introduce himself as well.
Thanks so much, Masha. Hi, so my name's Ash. I'm part of the Google Play business development team. So we work mostly with app developers around the globe that want to kind of grow their business on mobile.
Awesome. So that probably already gives you away what would be the topic of today's live stream. We hear from many of you that building great products is at the core of your business, and we're always very happy to hear that, because that is something we encourage you to do, and we want to make sure we help you with that. So before we go into monetization or ad mob best practices, it's also important to take a step back and share with you some of the things that our colleagues and friends from the Play team have around the actual app development, growing your products, making sure your products are well tailored to your audiences. We've heard this feedback loud and clear from many of you, so thank you, Ash, for joining. And today we will really focus on the Google Play part and a lot of exciting updates that Ash will walk us through. A few logistical questions before we dive into the content. As I said, the live chat is there for you to ask us any questions or let us know if any feedback, whether we need to slow down or speed up. We will be focusing on Google Play today, as I mentioned. I do want to acknowledge that there's probably a lot of ad mob related questions that are top of mind for you. We might not be able to take them today, just so that we keep this content relevant to the topic, but stay assured that we're taking note of all the points that you're raising, and we'll make sure to incorporate this in one of our upcoming live events specifically dedicated to ad mob. So if you have questions around ads, definitely share them, but we'll probably have to come back to them in one of the other live streams. We'll also share the recording with everyone. So if you couldn't make it today during the live broadcast, not to worry, the link will be in your email. So please check your inboxes and stay tuned for those details to come. We do have a couple of questions that you submitted through the form that we've shared as part of the invitation. Thanks for everyone who did that. So we'll make sure to address those at the end. And if time allows, we'll try and take a few live questions from the live chat. I think that's really it from my side from the logistics. And now let's get to the best part of this 30 minutes or so, your content, Ash.
Great. Thank you so much.
Just wait for the
slides to switch.
There you go.
All right. So first of all, thank you so much for all of you dialing in. It's great to be able to kind of talk to you a little bit about the Google Play platform. So I'm just going to dive straight in. Now, I think everyone on this call should be very familiar with Google Play and what it is we do. But I did want to kind of share one really interesting data point that I think really highlights the size and scope of the platform. So in the last 12 months, we've driven over 100 billion installs. It's a really remarkable number, and we're really proud of that, and we're really proud of the app and game developers kind of building on top of our platform that are driving that growth. But we think we can do a lot better. And so that's really what I want to talk to you about, is kind of how we see apps evolving in the future, which will kind of hopefully see 10x growth in this number in the years to come. So when I say we can do a lot better in terms of apps, there's kind of three different areas that I want to talk a little bit about, and I'll go over this kind of a few different times because I think they're kind of slightly complicated themes. But to start with, the world that we live in today, in terms of the number of different smartphones and form factors, is much different from when we started out in the early days of smartphones. And we acknowledge that there are really positive aspects of that, more user choice and so on. But for developers, what that means is building apps for this like complex, diverse ecosystem is much harder. So I think development is there's definitely room for improvement there immediately. Secondly, when you look at discovery, many of the apps on the store now have gotten to be quite big. And from a user standpoint, when you click install, there's a significant delay until the app kind of downloads onto your device and you get to use it. And that's not a great discovery experience. So we think there's room for improvement there. And then lastly, on distribution, again, because apps are so big and device storage space hasn't really kept up in the same way. So users then end up uninstalling these apps that they waited so long to install and would probably have a very good experience with, but they just don't have the space. So third area that we think there's a lot of room for improvement. And within this, I think the answer for development is we do believe apps need to get much more modular. On discovery, we think that discovery needs to be much more instant. You shouldn't have that delay of waiting for the app to download. And distribution needs to get more dynamic. And so we'll talk about kind of these shifts in each of these three areas today. Cool. So I started kind of talking about this, at the start, where the Android device ecosystem, it's really amazing what's been achieved in this space, right? So there's over 2 billion monthly active Android devices. And it's not just the number of devices, the diversity. So there used to just be smartphones. Now there's tablets and laptops and phones and cars. But even if you say, look, let's focus just on smartphones, the diversity there is tremendous. There's so many different screen sizes and pixel densities and CPU architectures, which is from a user standpoint incredible, right? You can find the right device for you. But from a developer standpoint, that poses challenges. And we see kind of developers falling into two camps, right? There are those that feel, look, we want to cater to all of this diversity, and so they go down what we call the multi-APK route, where they're building different APKs for each pixel density, sometimes language, sometimes CPU, and that can be really hard to maintain. So that's not a silver bullet either. Other developers say, look, we're not going to go down that path, it's too complex. So they put all the features into a single APK, but then that APK gets to be significantly bigger, and then you get the issues around discovery and distribution that we talked about as well. So there must be a better way. And we'll get to that in a second. But the point around APK size, I really do want to emphasize this. I mean, we have seen, this chart shows you kind of how the average APK size has changed over time, and it's grown 5x since 2012. And I assure you, device storage has not grown 5x in that period of time. So I think we are approaching a point where this sort of becomes a bad experience for users, and it's sort of something that we've been spending a lot of time thinking about, and we'll continue to kind of iterate on. And when I say bad experience for users, perhaps it's best shown by this chart. So what we're showing here is the install conversion rate at different APK sizes. And what you see is a very clear negative correlation, right? The smaller your APK size, the more likely it is for users to install it. And in fact, the rule of thumb is that about every 6 megabytes of reduction in APK size is 1 percentage point increase in install conversion. So very clear, very measurable, but very necessary. And we hear this feedback from a lot of you developers that you acknowledge that you're trying to. So this is a quote from Flipkart. You're really trying to keep the APK as small as possible, but at the same time, there are trade-offs there as well. You can't build all the features you would love to delight and engage your users if all of your time and energy is spent trying to keep the APK size small. So many developers are now facing this difficult trade-off in terms of should we keep the app lean or should we keep the app rich? And that's something that we feel is not a choice you should have to make. Now, if you look at kind of why this issue persists, and I mentioned this at the start a little bit. If you look at kind of a single APK, there's a lot of different pieces in there, and I think two aspects in particular. One is kind of language, right? So if you're supporting an app that has multiple languages, you often have all those language bundles in there. And secondly, whether it's pixel density or CPU, you have to kind of cater to whatever form factor that the app's going to be on. And so when you actually analyze all of the different bits that are on that APK on a device, you find there's a decent amount that's kind of unnecessary, right? So this is the core insight, and this is kind of what's driving a lot of our thinking. And our answer to all of this is what we call Android app bundles. In a nutshell, it basically means you don't have to build the APK. What you can do is upload different assets to Google Play, and we will do the hard work on the fly, crunching it together into an APK that is individually crafted for that device, for that user. So if they want if their language is set to Spanish, they won't get the language bundles for English and Chinese and all the other things that you're building into your app, which is pretty tremendous. So in terms of looking at this from an app developer standpoint, I think there's really amazing benefits. Obviously, smaller APK size, which as we mentioned is critically important and drives install conversion, drives retention, and all these other things. But for a lot of app developers that have been building these multiple APKs, actually now that overhead's gone. You no longer need to do that. It's a huge time saver. And there's a lot more to Android app bundles than we've actually touched on. And one of the more exciting features is what we call dynamic delivery. So once you've made your app much more modular, as we've been talking about, you can actually even make the functionality modular. And so you don't need to download all of the functionality in one go. You can actually chunk it up. And if there are pieces of functionality that are really relevant to a small segment of users, that doesn't need to go down at the start. It's only when those users kind of engage with that aspect of your app, then they receive those bits. So this is actually like taking app bundles to the next level. So a lot of developers have been building on top of app bundles, and I think the results have been pretty tremendous. So here we have kind of a stat from Twitter, which as you can imagine, this is a team which has a huge development team trying to build and optimize their app all the time. And just from using app bundles, they saw 35% improvement in APK size. And they're not the only one. We worked with a lot of other partners through the early access period for this functionality. And we saw anywhere from sort of 10 to 60% savings in APK size. The results will vary, obviously, based on your app and kind of what's in there. But that's pretty amazing results right off the bat. And you can imagine after they saw that APK size improvement, there's also resulting improvements in install conversion and retention and engagement. So it's in some sense it seems like this is a great technical tweak, but it really drives the bottom line as well. And we've gotten just fantastic feedback from developers across the board. So there's a couple of quotes here, one from Flipkart, one from Facebook. And I think for Flipkart, which is essentially the largest e-commerce player in India, they are really thinking about how to reach the next 100 million users in India. And these are people whose devices are going to be perhaps even less sophisticated. And they're going to have differences in terms of languages and so on. It's a really tough problem to crack, but I think they see that through dynamic delivery, in fact, now they can cater to the 100-odd languages in India without swelling the APK size for everyone. They can actually build unique functionality almost user by user. So it's a really, really sort of great tool for developers in kind of facing that type of challenge. Facebook, I think obviously we know, tremendous scale that these guys have. And for them, all of these little improvements just add up so quickly. So they've been one of the more enthusiastic proponents of dynamic delivery and app bundles in general, because the benefits they see at their scale are really amazing.
I'm very happy you're bringing this up because a lot of our developers are targeting a global audience. And I think that becomes even more so relevant once you start focusing on the markets outside of the one where you maybe started first. So that's something we look at when we think about the ad strategy, but obviously if it's not started with a good app strategy, then it's going to be quite challenging. So thank you for covering this. I hope this is relevant for those of you listening now or watching this live as we hear that many of you are looking for better ways to expand the geographies that your app currently covers.
Yeah, that's a great point. We do know that this trend of sort of apps going global is here to stay, and we love it. And so a lot of these features are really built with that use case in mind. So for those of you that haven't tried out app bundles, please, there's a link right on the screen here, g.co/Android app bundle. You can learn a lot more about it and hopefully start building your first app bundle today. From what I hear, it's actually really easy to do, and the savings in APK size are achieved very, very quickly.
Fantastic. I'll make sure to share all of these links in the follow-up emails, and I will update the description of this video as well. Yeah, thank you. It's a great start.
Sure. Well, lots more to talk about.
Yeah.
So a few screens ago we talked about how there were challenges in development, discovery, and distribution, and hopefully what we've talked about around app bundles and dynamic delivery would sort of address how this makes development more modular. Also, distribution much more dynamic, right? So you're not sending all the bits to every user, only the bits that are relevant to them. But we haven't yet touched on discovery and how we're hoping to improve discovery. And the answer there is what we call Google Play Instant. Now, rather than talk about it, I'm going to play a quick video. So bear with us while we get the tech. All right.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Sorry to jump in. We've heard your feedback that the sound was a bit on the lower end. Apologies about that. We'll share this video if possible in a follow-up.
Yeah,
and actually, the good news is that you'll talk us through the details of everything that I just covered. So thanks for the instant feedback. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. So in a nutshell, the whole idea of Google Play Instant is to remove that friction that's there today when your user is trying to use your app. where they have to download and wait for it to install. Here, they can actually go straight into the app experience without having to download it. It sounds almost magical. And when you use it, it actually feels pretty terrific. And the way you see this within the Play Store is, in the past, we used to just have an install button. Now there's this try now button, which launches that instant app experience. And I should point out this, as you saw in the video, this is for apps and games. It can be built for both. And it's not just within the store. So obviously this will be kind of a major distribution point for instant apps, will be the store. But at the same time, there's nothing to stop you from integrating links to the instant app within your ads. You can do social invites, and even within Google search. And all of these will have the same experience where the user is launched directly into that instant app or game experience. And there's no wait for download. They get to experience it right away. That native app experience right away. So now, I think from a user experience standpoint, clearly it's a phenomenal achievement, and it's a great way to engage with your users. But I also want to emphasize, again, this really drives the bottom line. What we've seen with the developers that have been building instant apps is they see a big bump in installs. The conversion rates off their store details page go up quite tremendously. And this is kind of slightly more subtle, but the users you're acquiring now have a really good understanding of what your app is, how it works. And so the engagement and retention numbers also improve because they're just better qualified, right? They're not coming into the app sort of cold and so on. So just sharing kind of a few different numbers here. We've been working with a lot of different developers to trial this, and across the board we get very good feedback. But Mighty Battles, one of the games that we partnered with early on to do this, saw 19% increase in installs, and then Vicky saw 5x increase in monetizable watch time. So they're really, really amazing benefits from using this technology. Now, I'm sure many of you are asking, you talked about Android app bundles, now we're talking about Google Play Instant. How does it work? Are you giving me twice the work to do?
Yeah.
Do I have to choose one or the other? And the beauty of it is, nope, you don't have to choose. Actually, Google Play Instant is built on top of Android app bundles. So if you're using Android app bundles, this is just one of the modules you can choose, and you can produce an instant app. No extra work. So okay, so bringing it together.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of different things. The Android app bundle, I think, is our big effort to make app development much more modular and reusable. Google Play Instant is how we're really helping solve that discovery problem and make discovery much more instant, eliminate that friction of waiting for the app to install. And dynamic delivery, which is also part of Android app bundles, makes distribution dynamic. You only send the bits to the users that need them. So that's a lot to have covered in a short period of time. Should we sort of pause there, see if you have any questions? Anyone on the live stream?
Maybe we can do a quick check on any questions before we move to the next part. Okay, it sounds like there aren't any live questions at the moment. There's still time to ask. The live chat is on, so please don't shy away. And feel free to ask any questions kind of in between these modules as we go through them.
Right.
Let's proceed.
All right, so switching gears a little bit, I think another area we do want to talk to all of you about is quality, and how to achieve quality and what it actually means for your app. And before we go into that, I want to spend a bit of time just on why having a technically stable and performant app is important. I think we all naturally get why it's important. We're either app users ourselves, and those are the apps we like to use. But if you look at the 1-star ratings on the Play Store, and we looked at lots and lots of ratings, 42% of those 1-star ratings mention stability or bugs. right? So this is a huge driver of 1-star ratings. And conversely, if you look at 5-star ratings, 73% of them mention speed, design, or usability. So if you're getting 1-star ratings and not 5-star ratings, clearly looking at kind of the technical architecture and performance of your app is a critical way to drive that from one to the other. Now, again, I want to make sure we anchor all of this in kind of the bottom line, which is what we know all of our developers care so much about. So another thing we did was we looked at a number of different games, and we sort of bucketed them by app non-responsive, or ANR, and crash rate. And we looked at what was the average time spent users playing these games. And once you control for all the different factors, you see very clearly that apps with a lower crash rate, lower ANR rate, the users will play about 2.5 to 3 minutes more a day, which comes to about 18 hours in a year. It's a pretty substantial increase just for making your app more performant.
Absolutely. And from the monetization perspective, we obviously, you all know this firsthand, the better and deeper engagement also correlates with better performance of your ads. So this all is kind of tying together, and it's a really important point. So thank you for highlighting this.
Not at all. Now, how do you achieve it? That's the
main question.
The main question. And I don't want to say there is the silver bullet or not a silver bullet, but obviously the answer is testing.
Testing. Okay.
Right? And you want to make sure that you're testing as early as possible, as wide as possible, as many diversity of devices and so on that you're testing with, and improving the quality of the testing in terms of the feedback, the quality of the feedback you're getting.
Correct.
And this is something we also take we're developers ourselves.
Yeah.
We take it very seriously in terms of making sure we have the best tools for all the developers out there. And I think broadly, there's kind of 3 different types of tests we encourage developers to do through the platform. The first is internal or closed tests. So this would be within your company or within a small group of kind of closed testers. You can within the platform lock down who is seeing your app. So this is a great thing to do kind of early on in the test cycle, and working out some of the initial kinks. Now, once you've kind of been through your internal or closed test, what we now have within the store is what we call early access. So it's a way to release your app without releasing your app, and give it sort of access to early adopters, right? So people that are a little bit more tolerant of bugs and so on, but really want to get the latest and greatest apps and games before everyone else. So they're willing to try and so on. And they give great feedback as a result. Now, we talked a lot about ratings, and I'm sure everyone's wondering about
I was just going to ask, where do the ratings map out to this picture? Exactly.
So I think you never want to, if there's one thing you really want to be very protective of is your ratings, right? And if you release your app too soon or in ways that it's going to get dinged on ratings, that's going to be really unfortunate. So early access is protected. Users don't actually rate the app.
Okay.
So it's really kind of a consequence-free testing in a way, and that's exactly what we want to encourage developers to do. You need to be able to get that early feedback and see what aspects of the game are working, not working. But you also want to do it without the penalty of some crashes, giving you a lot of 1-star ratings.
Absolutely.
Now, the sort of last bucket of testing you can do is open tests or beta tests, where you can test basically with a much broader audience, different markets. Here, users will be able to rate the app. So this is obviously when you're feeling much more confident about the features and the performance. But three sort of interesting elements that developers can play with, and we see lots of different combinations, right? Some developers will use all 3, some will use one of the 3. But I encourage you all to really get to know each of these areas and kind of what it can do for your app and game, and then kind of build out a model of how you want to leverage all of these.
Absolutely.
And actually, we've seen, as I mentioned, a lot of app and game developers using some or all of these different features. And so we have a case study here from Zenkoi, which used early access and open beta. And I think the feedback that they got through this process really helped to fine tune the game. And when it launched, they were able to launch a product that was really polished. It had all of the performance characteristics they were looking for. It had all the functionality, and their users absolutely loved it. And there's this great quote from the Zenkoi team, saying that they're really big fans of open beta in particular, and that they recommend all developers try it. And budget sort of 4 to 5 weeks, right? So that gives you the amount of time to hear from your users, and it's critical to have the development team on hand to iterate quickly. And as the feedback comes in, you should be able to fix things and respond to issues promptly. So I think that's a great best practice to have in mind.
Absolutely, and it's such a good way to engage your community into your development process. And ultimately, it really is all about keeping your users in the loop, involving them early on, and building products that really speak to their needs and their feedback. So great to see this process being much more streamlined and made so much easier, and also so much more diverse for different developers out there.
Absolutely. Now, another area which sort of goes hand in hand with testing is what we call Android Vitals. And Android Vitals is basically a way to see how your app or game is performing. And there's many different aspects within it. It's quite comprehensive. But you can look at your app in terms of its battery consumption or stability, right? How many crashes is it having? On what particular Android version is the crash rate high or low? So these are great indicators, and there's also ability to drill down and identify like specific issues here or there as well. And this is something we've been investing in quite a lot. So you'll see the number of different vitals available through the console, and all this available through the console kind of continues to grow, and so you can get more and more insight into the performance of your app. And we have seen over 100,000 developers making active use of this and seeing great results in terms of performance as a result of it. It's really straightforward to actually go into the console and find these data points. So I encourage everyone kind of on the live stream. I'm sure many of you already are using it, but if not, please do explore this today. And I think what's been really remarkable is since we've rolled this out, we've seen ecosystem-wide improvement in app quality. If you look at 5-star ratings now, 4% more 5-star ratings mention speed, design, and usability. It was already a lot before, but it's just gone up. So clearly, developers have been able to use the data through Android Vitals and drive improvements in app quality as a result. Conversely, when you look at 1-star ratings, actually lesser of them now mention stability and bugs and resource usage, as developers are finding those things faster and addressing them faster, which is a really great sign, right? As a user, it's fantastic to see this kind of ecosystem-wide improvement in the apps on the Play Store. So for those of you that are not familiar, I just wanted to flash up very quickly the kind of screens in the console and kind of how to use them, what they mean. So now there is an Android Vitals area within the console, and you kind of see quite a lot of information in one go. There's what we call kind of the core vitals, and here there's kind of ANR, which is app non-responsive, crash rate, excessive wake-ups, and stuck partial wake locks. Right, so these are kind of 4 really good indicators as to the stability of your app or game, and you can see the percentage of sessions that are impacted in each of these. Not only that, there's what we call a bad behavior threshold, so you can see how you stack up against what users' expectation is. Nobody will ever have 0% crashes, right? Where software inherently has bugs, but there's a threshold below which the users stop noticing, and it stops being a major factor in how people perceive your app or game. So the lower you can achieve, the better. But I'd say once you're we wanted to make sure there's a threshold that people see so that they know whether it's something that is a problem or not, right? So look to the thresholds to kind of give you that sort of understanding of like, actually, I need this should be prioritized massively, or actually we're kind of good enough, we can put our focus elsewhere. And one of the things I love is actually the console will identify these areas for you. If there is a particular problem area, it'll be highlighted in this, what we call an action tile right at the top. And for this one, actually, it's a bit hard to read, but I think the crash rate is high on a particular version of the app, right? So it's giving you that level of granularity to look into. So sometimes, when you look at averages and aggregates, you can miss that, there's actually a segment of users out there having a bad experience. And the idea is for us to drill down and surface that level of insight for you. So as we said, the feedback from developers around this has been really great. Big Fish Games is major game developer. They have many games over 10 million installs, and they adopted this quite enthusiastically, and they saw a 45% decrease in aggregate crashes as a result of having that data and all the testing tools. So by the time they launch, you can imagine the quality of the game was so much better, and then the performance of it was so much better as a result as well. So one more case study here. So Own Coffee Shop, and I love these charts that they have. So the red line here shows their crash rate, and the blue line is the day one retention. And you can see right at the start, their crash rate was getting close to kind of 10%, right? Which is not good at all. But then using the Android Vitals data, using the kind of testing tools available, they were able to drive it down to below the threshold pretty quickly, right? So that's an 18-day period. And obviously that's much better for their users, but they also saw day one retention go up 11% over that period, right? So 11% improvement in day one retention in 18 days. That is fantastic, right? And if you can achieve that while also delivering a better experience for your users, it's a win-win.
So it's a significantly better experience for users, right? And that's the main focus that we should always keep in mind.
Yeah. Okay, and so we've talked an awful lot about various tools within the Play Store, and I know it can be a bit overwhelming at times to kind of learn how to use all of what the Play Store has to offer. With that in mind, we've developed this new e-learning site called Play Academy, and the links they're on the screen right now. It's a pretty great resource. We're just getting started. It's going to get better and better. But I did want to highlight a couple of things about it. So first up, it is completely universal. You actually don't even need a Google developer account to access it. Anyone with a Google account can go in and use Play Academy right now. There's sort of three different focus areas. We'll talk about new and existing Play functionality. We'll talk about best practices. And at the same time, there's a lot of guidance around policy, which we know is a major question that a lot of developers have. And the content is organized into learning tracks. So let's say you want to understand how to use the Play console, there's a track of courses. And each of them is what we call a micro learning. So they're 5 to 15 minutes. So really, really focused. You can go deep into one area, learn all about it, and then as it's part of a track, you can over time kind of build your knowledge more comprehensively, and then become an expert in that area. So we're really happy with this tool. We're investing in it, and we want to kind of add tracks and add courses and so on over time. But we'd love for more of you to use it and give us feedback on how it helps. What is it not addressing yet?
Absolutely, would echo that. So as I mentioned, we'll share these links, but please check it out, go through some of the courses, especially the ones that are particularly relevant, and give us feedback. As Ash said, the team is just getting started, so it would be good to incorporate more of the developer feedback into the next steps. Thank you for this. This is very comprehensive. What we're going to do now, before we wrap up, is, and I'm just looking at my colleagues who are helping us with the coordination of the questions. Thank you guys very much, first of all. So we're just gonna take a quick look at the live chat so we can put up the slides and maybe, yeah. So before we look at the live chat itself, I wanted to make sure we covered the questions that came to us through the Q&A form. Again, thank you for those of you who used it. And one question I have on it that we'll cover now. Let me just give us 1 second just for us to switch our view here so that we see the live chat. Bear with us 1 minute. I'm just getting set up. Perfect. Thank you for your patience. We're doing this live, so appreciate your understanding. So maybe before we jump into the chat, Nash has any questions here in front of him. But one thing I did want to bring up from the Q&A form is around the question that basically says, is it possible to insert external codes into your own mobile games? So purchase a client product, get a special code to unlock an in-app item. And I have heard this question come up from other developers. So I think that's not just a one-off case. So it would be good to get your guidance on this.
Yeah, so absolutely. And I think it's a great idea. So the Play console itself has promo code functionality, which we encourage developers to use. You can go in and mint your own codes and then distribute them. I know a number of developers will do partnerships with brands like Pepsi, right? And then their promo code gets, under a bottle cap of every Pepsi distributed and so on. It's a great way to build visibility for your app or game. So we encourage it. Like I said, the Play console itself has promo code functionality, but you can use your own as well. So really up to you.
Yeah, thank you for this. I do have a few questions that I wanted to ask you, and they are really gathered from a number of conversations with developers. So I know they're top of mind. And the one you probably expect is how to get featured on Google Play.
Of course.
That's something we hear a lot, and I think it would be unfair to go through this live stream without touching on it.
Certainly. It's a question I get a lot as well. And so I will say this. I think I know a lot of you are very curious about this and very keen to get featured. I think featuring is not the silver bullet people think it is. And people put, they feel like featuring is so critically important that they have to get it. There perhaps was a time when featuring would drive a huge number of installs for developers. Increasingly, it doesn't. What we actually suggest to developers and encourage them to do is, focus on all of the things we talked about today. Focus on, using great functionality within the platform to make your app smaller, lighter, more performant. Focus on building great new features and driving up engagement and retention. All of that will actually lead to more visibility within the store. And that will give you a much bigger lift, actually, than featuring, and a sustained lift. So I'd say, don't worry so much about featuring. Build great apps, and the users will come.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. One other question we get quite a lot is how to cross-promote your app with other developers. What are some of the best practices that you would call out from this side of the things?
Yeah. We do see a fair bit of this, and I don't know if I'm that knowledgeable about best practices and so on, but I think it's really important to find apps that are very complementary to your own. That's a great way to then acquire users that you wouldn't normally get. So I think definitely talk to other app and game developers, kind of understand who they're going after. Especially if you have very complementary user bases, you can help them, they can help you. It's a really great idea.
Awesome. And maybe the last one from my side, and we'll give you a quick moment to look through the chat before we, if time allows us to take any live questions. A lot of our audiences, from what we know, focus on casual games or on building great utility apps. For these two types of ads, any advice from your side or anything else you would add on top of the things that we've already covered?
I think on top of what we've already covered, one thing we didn't get to talk so much about today was localization. right? So I think naturally for casual games and utility apps, the audience tends to be very global. And I think how do you actually reach this audience that you know not just speak different languages, but have different user behaviors and so on. So I would really sort of encourage developers to, put more focus behind this. Pick a few markets where you think the appeal of your app and game is higher, and then really actually spend time there, get to know the users, and localize for that. I think sometimes the mistake some app and game developers can do is kind of almost go scattershot around the globe. Let's just launch and kind of see what happens. And that's a good first step. But I think then if you really think, look, LATAM's the market for me, go beyond just the basics of language localization. Try and really culturalize your app or game in simple ways, right? I mean, I think we found a lot of app and game developers that are focused on LATAM would have a carnival festival within the game itself. And that's something local users in that market will love. And if you're targeting Thailand, Songkran, or the Middle East, Ramadan, similarly, I think it's a great way to show your relevance and that you care for users in those markets.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely echoing this also from the monetization perspective, as you think about both, in terms of your earnings in different markets, as well as the investments that you make in acquiring your users with different paid user acquisition efforts. It's important to keep the global picture in mind. So maybe I'll give you a moment to have a look at the live chat questions, and in the meantime, I'll just take this time to cover a few important logistical questions. So those of you who maybe are dialing in a bit later, just to recap, everyone will get an email with the recording of this. So thank you for signing up. If you couldn't watch us live, that's absolutely fine. Please have a look at the video at whenever it's more convenient for you. We will always share a feedback form. So please let us know what you thought about today's video. Give us any ideas for future topics, things that we should cover. We really hope that these initiatives are useful. So we're allowing you to help us understand what are the right topics to cover. And I also wanted to touch on a few upcoming initiatives that we have in the works. We'll partner with our colleagues from the app growth teams, and we'll also cover another important part of growing your app business, which talks about user acquisition. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't already gotten right, definitely check your inboxes soon, and we'll be back online with that. And before we wrap up today, maybe
I think there was a couple of great questions and comments. One person actually has built using an app bundles, which is great to see. Congrats.
Real-time feedback.
Yeah. Okay. Now I think one of the questions was development time for instant apps. I think the answer there is a little bit complicated. I've heard a range of feedback. I think it depends a bit on your app or game. So obviously, building an instant app also means you need to shrink down the APK size of the experience. You also need to think about what is the experience you want to show to the user during that instant experience. Now, many games, there's different modes. There might be a puzzle mode and then like a meta game and so on. So you actually do need to pick and choose. So the answer is it depends. We've seen a lot of app and game developers actually just get there almost out of the box. But if your game is more complicated, it can take time. And I think you do need to be thoughtful about what that user experience is. So for instance, it's usually you don't want to show them the tutorial. You want to actually show them, a few levels in when the game's getting really fun. So please do think about that as well, and when you're developing your instant game. I did see a couple other questions. So one was about PayPal as a payout method. Actually, I don't have the answer to that. I know in various markets we support PayPal as a form payment users can use. I'm not sure if we support it as a payout method or if there's a timeline on that. And I think somebody else was asking about editor's choice on Google Play. So I think like various things kind of in the Play Store, look, ultimately we are very focused on making sure we're highlighting all those hidden gems, those great apps with very high ratings and very high retention. So keep kind of optimizing on those metrics vitals as well. And for sure, you will get noticed and kind of put in a lot of those collections.
Yeah, I think similarly to what you mentioned about the feature, right? Keeping the focus on building great products, staying relevant and thoughtful of your audience, and continuously leveraging the tools and the best practices that are available to also make this process smoother for you as a developer and a business owner. I think that's it from. Oh, sorry, we do have more questions.
Oh, we have a very interesting question here. So in the future, will Google Play Instant replace the Google Play Store? No immediate plans for that. We do see kind of the two experiences continuing side by side. But who knows? I think 10 years ago, nobody would have predicted mobile apps. So it's anybody's guess. But yes, we do think about these types of questions as well. Will you ever add a way to view live install counts? I think the answer to that is no. We found, we do want to be a bit careful in servicing live install counts because there's some amount of abuse that happens, and we want to make sure we're kind of scrubbing that out. So when we do show install counts, we want to be very, very confident that we're giving an accurate representation of kind of the actual users using those installs as opposed to just the number of like actual installs that were pushed. So that's kind of why we don't show live install counts.
Thank you for this. I think we're going to be wrapping up because we also don't want to keep you way over time. I think this conversation can extend way beyond 1 hour. Thank you everyone for great questions. Do share more of them as we run this type of initiatives on, and definitely check out the existing educational resources. The Play Success Academy is a great example. So I think at that we'll thank you, our speaker, for this great time and a lot of good content. Thank you everyone who dialed in and everyone who will watch this recorded. You'll get a lot of resources from us. Please do take a minute to give us feedback, and we'll see you in the next live event. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.